But anyway, so you're all right, are you, Matt? You good?
Yes, good. Now that the elections are over, I'm a little bit better. The elections were a very busy period over the last week. I think at one point I was awake for 38 hours. So yeah, it was a bit of a just about recovered now. And then I had to watch England, and that made it worse.
I bet your little map with all your units out was pinging up everywhere, wasn't it?
Yeah, you could say that. I've got some stats I can share actually. I only got them today, so I can share a bit more information with you if you'd like to know when we get to that point. But yeah, it was a really busy period. Luckily we only have to do it every 5 years or so, depending on how the government, I guess, do and how they perform. But yeah, it was my fourth general election that I've been part of since I've worked for LiveU. And it was probably one of the most anticipated results, I think, in history that I can remember. And then, yeah, it went the way that it did, which was a landslide. So everybody was, there's quite a lot of content generation demand around the event generally. But yeah, the stats, I mean, we had around near just about 900 units we recorded in active service just in the UK throughout the 3rd and the 5th of July. So yeah, there was a lot of units in use covering all of our broadcast clients over that period. So
And then traffic-wise, that's got to be mad for you. Like, how do you prepare for any problems with servers and stuff like that? Is it a bit of a hands on deck?
yeah, I mean, largely the vast majority of the customer base that are using LiveU equipment are well established anyway, right? I'm proud of the fact that the vast majority of the UK broadcast clients have been LiveU customers for over a decade. So they're all well established, they're all well in service, well adopted, it's used daily. So really, this was more of a short-term uplift to cope with the demand, largely around the election counts and around the kind of pre and post coverage increase around the elections itself. But yeah, as I say, between 3rd and 5th of July, we had it was about nearly 900 units in use, and we recorded 17,642 live sessions across those 2 days. Crazy, right? But yeah, like I say, we didn't have any kind of big problems to worry about. Everything was well tested and everything's already pretty well adopted anyway. We had lots of contingency in place. I was at one broadcaster for a kind of 24-hour period to just be shoulder to shoulder with them. This is the kind of relationship we have with a lot of our customers to be there to support them and help them out. So yeah, I was at one. We had 4 or 5 different team members all over the country, kind of spread it out with different kind of customers. We had a remote operations center in play, ready to support any big problems. We have DevOps and cloud operations support people. So it's a massive undertaking with a large kind of um, period to be awake. But luckily, we managed to stay awake for the whole thing. So it was great.
How many hours did you do?
I was awake for a total of 38 hours. So I arrived. I thought I'd get a little bit longer than that, but I've got young children, so I didn't have any sleep in the morning. I got to my customer about 6 p.m. in the evening, and I left there at about 8 a.m. in the morning. And then got the train home, and then did a bit more, and then yeah,
That's we always say that's almost like having jet lag from traveling, isn't it?
it's what it feels like actually. Yeah, now you mention it, it's exactly what it felt like.
Because you go through all sorts. Like mentally, there's this certain wall, and when you get past the wall, and you're like, actually, I don't need sleep; it'll be fine. But then, yeah, it just messes your time clock
It,
up,
it,
doesn't it?
it does, yeah. It takes longer than 2 days to recover from 2 days of non-sleep, you know. So yeah, it was a tough period, but well worth it, and happy to say everything went really well. So yeah, it was great. Thanks. So my name's Matthew Stringer. I've worked with and for LiveU now for around 13 years or so. I think I started around 2011, something like that. And I started around the sort of time where the first royal wedding happened. I remember it quite vividly. Mostly because I joined at the period that was very, very busy with all of our units being used for William and Kate's wedding. But yeah, so through that time, I kind of started up. My background is relatively kind of IT and technical orientated, but I also had a sales orientated background as well. And I kind of joined, well, I originally joined a company called Garland, who were the exclusive kind of LiveU partner in the UK. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we were acquired as Garland as LiveU UK. So now we're direct and we're LiveU UK. Here we have an office based in Warwickshire. We have a presence in London and people dotted over all over the UK. And that team's significantly grown over the last kind of 10 years that I've been around. I think, now the customer base has grown, the products have grown, the services have grown. And yeah, when I started doing it, we had much bigger, much heavier units. A lot of them were software orientated. They were relatively large. Used to be, my wife used to refer to them anyway as the Ghostbuster pack. That's kind of showing my age a little bit. But yeah, over the last kind of 7 or 8 years, the products have migrated more to hardware orientated products rather than software orientated products. But back then we were doing it in the kind of 2G, 3G kind of was just emerging at that point. The video inputs from the cameras were largely Firewire orientated, if we can all remember that far back. And obviously we migrated through various different product iterations now, all the way up to the LU800, which you had to play with recently. So yeah, a lot's happened in that kind of decade or more.
Yeah, big time. I mean, we've seen things move forward, particularly from COVID, like within the AV world. Obviously, that's kind of how we went from being, I don't know, say sort of your 101 kind of AV production. Here's some video lights and some PA, to streaming and providing virtual remote solutions. That's kind of where we came from with that. I was really interested because obviously you're saying about having joined at this sort of wedding and things like that. You must see from a top-down perspective, kind of like society's events unfolding, pretty much. So like as a consistent thing. This is again sort of just the current landscape. So within politics, you mentioned at the beginning there that you've been sort of seeing that unfold. I was wondering if you'd tell us a bit more about that, really.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've been involved in a lot over the years. As I say, when I started, I kind of started as a support person and sales orientated person. And, over the kind of decade or more that I've been working for LiveU now, I'm a UK sales director for LiveU UK. And you're right, over that kind of decade, we've seen countless different things. I mean, there's probably too many to remember. But yeah, we've been pretty much involved in every single global news and sports event. Really, I mean, the company itself, LiveU, is pretty much 20 years old. So from memory, I think one of the first ever deployments was, it would have been in South Africa, I think, for what then would have been, I think, the World Cup, wasn't it, back then? Or might have even been prior to that, around the Olympic period. But yeah, so, that was the kind of first big deployment, or way back when. And what I've actually, been involved in all the way through, as you say, we've seen royal weddings. More recently, we've seen coronations. We're obviously doing a lot now around the Olympics, and we've been involved massively over all the Olympics and global football and sporting tournaments over the years. And every year that we are involved, our customer base has, significantly grown. Our products and service offerings have grown, as has the appetite to consume content. And as has the number of events overall and our ability to support them. So it's kind of created a perfect storm, really, for us to be able to be almost involved in all of those things quite closely with our customers, so that they can essentially do more with less, right? There's more appetite and more ways of consuming content in the world now. And all of these things have increased alongside the technology itself and the connectivity itself. So, we've migrated over the years from various different codec derivatives. We're now at HEVC, H.265 codec on hardware, as I say. So we've got all of that. And over that period, we've added, when we started, it was really just, we provided a backpack, a receiver, and maybe some audio comms in the other direction. And what's kind of broadly changed significantly over that period is we've added more and more tools, if you like, to that contribution part. We've then added things like, as part of that, we've got audio intercom services, we've got video return services so that there's better collaboration and visibility for the field crews. And we've added more and more things like IP pipe to just do data connectivity between the unit and server, and data bridge, which just turns the unit into a bonded hotspot. So all of these things really just to help our field crews on the side. So, we've done a lot of work on the contribution side over the years, and that's grown with all those additional tools. What's then changed is we've had more and more people adopt other working methodologies. As you say, COVID was a big change for that. remote productions being a big thing that we've seen growth for. So we're now offering that as a service in the cloud with something called LiveU Studio. So that's expanded kind of beyond what we do just at the backpack level, but that remains, critical to the workflow and, our bread and butter. We've got the production services with LiveU Studio, and then we've also got distribution services now through LiveU Matrix that can offer on with delivery, and recording services with ingest, and a whole kind of end-to-end ecosystem now of products and services. So we've amalgamated all of that into an end-to-end workflow, really, rather than having just the backpack. And that's helped us grow more and more and more work we do with all of our customers for all those events. But yeah, I mean, thinking about some of the things we've done over that period, I think I've seen quite a lot. I mean, we've done live from hot air balloons, aeroplanes, helicopters, submarines, all sorts of different things, to be honest with you. Yeah, the submarines one was a difficult one for sure. But there was no cellular connectivity involved in that. That was a point-to-point connection overall, but it worked very well. So yeah, we've seen quite a lot for sure. There's too many things to probably mention over that period.
Where do you see things going then? Like, because our view is very much that actually, virtual production kind of should take a stronger place than it has at the moment, because people are only sort of developing their awareness, even though it's been over a prolonged period of time. And it's now at a point where, people are still checking out what someone else is doing to see if it's okay. Does this work? Is this good, etc.? And more people are getting good metrics from it. And so they're sort of moving towards that. But we've got a real vision as well, like in terms of the environmental impact that goes with it. So, for example, you hold a virtual event, you don't have to fly 500 delegates globally to one location. You don't have to heat the venue. You don't have to provide all of the food that goes with that. There's like a really big list to it. Yeah, and I just think that actually that's going to echo, I think, particularly with younger generations. But for you guys, like, where do you see yourself sitting in the market, sort of future within that? Is it solely just sort of bouncing signals, or is there something else that sort of goes within that as well? Or
yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the previous point, really, about how we've kind of grown from being just a backpack, if you like, when we first started. And that's, our bread and butter back in the day was fundamentally a satellite truck replacement kind of technology for news gathering kind of requirements more than anything. The company started with our three founders essentially at an American football game, and they were watching how satellite was used to be able to get that content back, and kind of had that light bulb moment, if you like, where they can combine the multiple SIM cards together and multiple data bearers together to create a alternative, and we disrupted that kind of market very early on, initially as a kind of complementary thing, and over time it's become more of a primary, to be able to replace that traditional kind of satellite truck workflow. I think, there'll always be a place for the satellite truck, and for that to exist and now coexist with bonding, as it were. But that's kind of where it all started, and that's how we've evolved the product kind of layer. And then, as I say, we've kind of then evolved from just being that kind of contribution part with all the fundamental kind of production tools underpinning it, because they're just as important as the video in the end, right? Without the comms, without the interactivity between the kind of contribution side and the studio side, the broadcast isn't as rich as it could be, and not as, controlled as it could be. Nobody likes that, interview situation where you can't hear the other person or anything. So, driving down latency with our algorithm and LRT fundamentally underpinning all of this, which is our algorithm, which has evolved as well over that period. It kind of underpins everything we do overall to make sure that everything we do is as reliable and as high quality as possible. So that's kind of put us in good stead. What's then happened is about 3 years ago, we acquired a company. They have now been amalgamated into what we offer. We call it LiveU Studio. And you're right, in terms of what's happening in the market, remote production has been well adopted in the broadcast industry, over the last kind of 7 or 8 years. For all the reasons you mentioned, sustainability is an important thing for everyone, and we take it very seriously ourselves. And we, can equally see the appetite for broadcasters, not just to save money, although that's obviously a big part of it, to be able to make productions more sustainable and more cost effective, to be able to get more content in a more viable way. So I think that remote production is kind of well established now. I think what I can see it going towards now is this cloud production narrative. So there's kind of two ways people are doing that. Just for those who don't know, remote production is obviously taking encoded video feeds from source to a receive location and then producing it somewhere else. So you still have the people, you still have the hardware, it's just in a different location, and you produce your content there rather than sending them all on site, producing it on site and sending it for transmission from site. So remote production, I think, is well understood. It's quite often referred to as REMI in the US market as well, but remote production is typically the name for it. Then, over the last 5-6 years, COVID was a big trigger for that, as you mentioned, where people kind of needed to adopt new workflows that were more, I guess, more suitable for the times when it was back then, right? People were restricted on travel. We couldn't have as many people on site. And, that kind of helped overall, I guess, with that kind of direction towards more cost-effective, sustainable remote production. So that kind of happened very quickly. But then cloud production was explored equally very early on. Some of our customers were producing tier 1, tier 2 kind of content fully in the cloud for broadcast. And what I mean by that is they were taking what they would have taken as a physical implementation of production into software and deploying that within a cloud service provider. So they would put our LiveU server in the cloud. They would hand off from the LiveU server in IP to a software stack that ultimately can be anything, right? We're handing off a NDI stream at that point, or an SRT stream or whatever, into a software-built production facility that anybody can build with whatever solution they want. So, we've seen all different manner of different implementations, from GVAMP to VisVector to vMix to all sorts of different things, Simply Live, all of those. People like to build their own thing and have it in their familiar way, in a modular way, even mapping physical control services to those software nodes in the cloud, and they produce everything in software in the cloud. That's a big thing that we saw change around COVID period. And it's adopted and evolved ever since. And all of our solutions and our production solutions specifically are agnostic to the video chain. So you can also have people spread all over, but still be part of the video return part and the audio return part and the comms layer, but actually doing all the production effectively lightweight or remotely at the front end, and then in the cloud fully on the production end. So we've seen a large growth towards that, and it seems as though it's here to stay. And what it's meant is that people have obviously gained that sustainability and cost saving part on the contribution end, and now they're looking at how they can get that on the receive and production part of that as well, which is just, again, making things more cost effective. And the other thing I think is, in addition to the sustainability, is also the impact on people, right? I mean, the engineers and the producers and the operators and all the people involved in our industry, they're asked a lot of, right? They work weekends, they travel a lot. The events can go on for, well, in relation to the elections, for 38 hours. So I think that it also opens up a lot of welfare related benefits to the people who are actually, working very hard in the industry, to not necessarily have to travel all over the place, because obviously the cloud implementation of production means that people can be anywhere. They can log into that production environment from anywhere and produce the program. And, yes, multiple people can be involved and can collaborate within it, and it works very well. So it's kind of the remote production benefits that you're seeing on the front end into the cloud end. And that's proved to be very, very successful. We're able to...
With redundancy as well, doesn't it? Because, say, for example, you've got your sort of main racks sort of mixer is not well, can't make it. Instead of a panic, it's just literally on the phone. Can you just dial into this web address? Yes, of course I can, no problem. Here we go. It's just, it's much more fail safe.
It is, yeah. Cloud by design, it can be built to be very resilient, either by nature because of the way you can deploy cloud, implementations with load balancing servers and all sorts of stuff. Or you can physically build two discrete environments so that you can fail over from one to the other or utilize both at the same time. So I think we've seen a large growth and adoption of that cloud production. There's been a lot of tier 1 broadcasters that have done a lot of publicity around that. One of the ones that comes to mind was the work that BT Sport did around the UEFA Youth League. you know, the UEFA Youth League obviously doesn't carry a lot of budget associated to it. So being able to produce that in a more cost-effective and sustainable way meant that they could actually get it to viewers, which was something that, you know, wasn't achievable before the remote production and cloud production kind of implementation. And that continues, you know, and other big broadcasters in sports have equally done the same sort of thing, you know. And we started out, I remember, it's also public, so we can talk about it. I remember that very early on in the COVID days, Sky Sports did netball in the cloud, and you know, it was very successful for all the reasons we knew that we had to adhere to around the COVID period, and you know, those things remain. And overall, I think that was one of the reasons that we decided to launch LiveU Studio, because you know, there are customers out there that want to build their own cloud production software stack, you know, build their own studio in the cloud, effectively, their own MCR or production workflow in the cloud. But there are equally people who want something that's kind of off the shelf that they can deploy very quickly. They can integrate graphics within it. They can do vision mixing and all the, you know, different things that you would need to do in the cloud around, you know, the transitions around it and audio mixing and bringing in your VOD assets, bringing in guests. So LiveU Studio is exactly that. You know, in the end, you can subscribe to a platform, you can open a web browser, you can spin up an event very quickly, bring in all of your sources, output all up to 30 destinations you can output to, so you can deliver a consistent output to all of your social channels in one go. And it's an off-the-shelf solution you can spin up in 5 minutes. So, you know, we've got kind of two narratives that we're seeing. You kind of got these broadcasters who want to build their own implementation of that. And then you've got the use case where people want something off the shelf that they can do quick events with, whether it be fast channels, whether it be, I don't know, a lower demographic of sport that doesn't require all of the software implementation that we've just been speaking about. And you just want something that you can spin up and go with live, you know, immediately. And we're currently working on lots of developments for that platform, including the integration of all of our production tools. The units are already integrated, so you can deliver field units with LRT natively into that production platform, and down to servers and onwards into Matrix and other things as well. So for the question of where is it going, I think I think that we're going to see more available connectivity as time goes on. You know, we've been doing a lot in the kind of 3G, 4G, 5G world, but over the last couple of years, we've seen we've used private 5G for many different use cases. Coronation was one of the main ones around that, where we had, you know, lots of units being used over a private 5G implementation that was done with some of our friends at Neutral Wireless. They implemented their own private 5G network on the MAL for the Coronation, and we had 50 or so units utilizing that connectivity for dedicated bandwidth over a private 5G implementation. That's something that we're seeing more and more because our units natively support it. And when you blend that potentially with the other networks that are coming, so we also, on that same day, we actually did the first, that I know of at least, the first 5G network slicing. We did that as well in the same kind of project where we had a portion of the public networks carved out for us to be able to test that.
When you deploy something that's new like that, like how much testing goes into it, and then how much I don't know how to phrase it as such. Obviously, the moment you're about to go live is a bit tense, right?
I think you know, preparation is everything, I think, in the broadcast industry, and I think that we did our fair share of it. You know, luckily the test lab that was there for the slicing component is actually relatively close to our office, so we were able to do a lot of testing there. But in the grand scheme of things, there wasn't a lot of testing to do. I mean, from our perspective at least, it's a SIM card and a modem and it's connecting to the network, right? I suppose there was a bit more understanding required as to how the network's going to deal with a high capacity kind of video path or, you know, bandwidth going through that slice. And there's lots of different things related to slicing. But overall, it worked really well. We had a dedicated network slice. At one point, we had a unit using the network slice, the private 5G, and the public networks all in one go. So yeah, we ended up, I think that we're definitely going to start to see more connectivity options available. I mean, we're already using things like Starlink and OneWeb and other connections, you know, and historically we've been able to utilize things like Ka-band satellite and BGAN and all of, in the end, we'll use any internet connection. A lot of people refer to it as a cellular bonding principle, but it's not really. It's an IP bonding principle. It's just that cellular networks is kind of, always pretty much everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but most places. So yeah, in the end, we will utilize as much connectivity as we can get, and I think we're starting to see the evolution of that, and I think we're also looking now at how the evolution of LRT, if you like, will go that next step, if you like, to make things even more reliable and more powerful. For the broadcast industry, it's kind of been 13 years or more that I've been involved, but 20 years over time of people just kind of, now, I mean, I'll tell you a story that someone told me, right? About 5 years ago, we were in a particular news broadcaster, a big one, and they kind of said that the times have turned with relation to how they perceive LiveU, right? Maybe you're right. Maybe 10 years ago, it was kind of a best effort kind of thing, right? Because we were ultimately beholden to the available connectivity that was available. But because that's improved, because the products have become more efficient and more reliable, and the codecs are better, and generally, the thing that they said to us now was the opposite. It was actually like, look, we've come to trust and use LiveU as a part of our daily workflow. We're now more surprised when it doesn't work. You know what I mean? It kind of flipped round the other way. It wasn't a best effort thing. Oh, that might work. It's kind of, well, we know it works. Oh, and when it doesn't, they're like, well, how come it didn't? It normally works all the time. So it's changed significantly, I think. And in the news world, that's for sure. And in the sports world, that's happening now. I would say, people have kind of seen what the news guys have done, and it's evolved now because we can get higher quality, more reliability, lower latency, overall. We're seeing that in the sports industry now, and that's where we're seeing a lot of changes and a lot of growth in there. And I think now you're right, it's transcending to other industries now. So the virtual event world, the enterprise world, the public sector, all of those areas are now starting to see the benefits of how it works. And you're right, we are having to kind of explain. It's kind of like going back to when I started and explaining to the broadcasters, how it works, why it's so reliable, and why you should look at it. Starting to kind of have to do that again, if you like, in some of the other sectors to prove the same to them. And yeah, it's quite exciting. I like doing that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. I think it's really cool when there's something that's happening that is benefiting other sectors and moving it across, like with the whole virtual events. Yeah, vMix made quite a big difference to that, like in terms of the way it was delivered, and it tied a lot of things together. It was sort of almost in a way a little bit Swiss Army knife gaffer tape for kind of video signals at the time when we didn't have anything else. But it's important that those changes happen and that we embrace them and then start looking at where we can go next, we were having to originally sort of put everything together with video cards and use analog sound desks to travel signals in ways they shouldn't really go, that kind of thing. And then once you suss it out, like there is an element of like, yeah, okay, let's protect that because actually we're leading in what we're doing because we've understood something. But there is a point at which I think sharing is important, because otherwise the whole industry just sits and waits and becomes like really slow. And I've seen that like with some sort of larger global companies where it's not really red tape. It's just that changes take a long time to happen within those.
You're right. And I think that the other thing that has changed for us, I think over the last kind of 5-6 years or more, we've historically been a kind of closed ecosystem, right, where we have our, LRT protocols, which, is kind of our secret sauce and our intellectual property overall, which is doing what it does, which, combines together all of this technology together, right? It's the adaptive encoding principles that we apply to the video layer, the bonding and the awareness of all of the bandwidth and how we can adapt the video to that. We've got our ability to maximize that bonding over things like other connections, things like Starlink and local connections, the ability to go public network and down or point to point over private networks. We've got the kind of forward error correction and the packet reordering and stuff that underpins the integrity of that video end to end, and then our antennas as well, which ultimately help us maximize the overall signal. LRT overall is is the secret. But what I think has also changed for us over the last kind of 5 years or more is the importance of working with other industry leaders and other vendors, because we want to be able to offer an end-to-end solution for our customers, both ourselves, but equally through trusted partners that our customers already have, right? So, we can now, from our LiveU servers, we can output a variety of different IP protocols, right? So we can output your traditional kind of RTMP outputs, kind of always been there, but we can output SRT or RTSP or, any other kind of variety of different IP output streams overall, to multiple destinations at scale. But having kind of partnerships with other market and industry leaders, people like AWS and people like Dina and the WolfTech guys and a variety of others. There's a long list. Sorry if I haven't mentioned all of them. But yeah, I think the collaboration with other parts and other suppliers within the industry is also very important. And I think that's where we've also seen a change and an interoperability there, especially with LiveU ingest. LiveU ingest is able to now effectively record all of the LiveU live feeds with metadata from the origin of the metadata within a newsroom control system, for example, carry that all the way through to the recorded file and then hand that off back into the media asset management system, with us adding even more metadata to it so that people have got even more visibility of where that content has come from all the way through the chain, all the way down to the point of transmission, which is equally, becoming more and more important. This is where you catch me out, right?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
We'll see.
The thing is, right, one of them is literally, what are your most memorable events? And I mean, you've already listed off a ton.
Yeah, that's true. I think, the elections are quite fresh, but I'll always have a fond memory for when we did one. I forget exactly which one it was. I don't think it was the last one, maybe even the one before that, where we were live from pretty much. I think it was about 300 election counts in the end, maybe somewhere between 250 and 300 it was. And together with our friends at Sky News, we were able to get the Guinness World Record for the most concurrent live transmissions at the time. That's one that always sticks in my memory. It was another busy night, just like the elections just gone, and there was a significant number of units involved. To be able to get the content from up to 300 odd election counts was no small undertaking, and it went really, really well. I mean, that's one that always sticks in my mind. There's other ones though, I mean, not for the same reasons, to go to the other end of the scale. I remember when I first started, my director kind of at the time said to me, "Oh, I need you to go and help with an Australian news broadcaster in London, and you need to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning." And that was it. And I was like, "Oh, okay, no problem." The day before that, he texted me and said, "Don't forget your running shoes." And I was like, "What?" So basically, I had to turn up at like 5 a.m. in the morning in London with my running shoes and a LiveU backpack. And at this point, it was the bigger and heavier one. And it was a kind of Australian take on the old show Challenge Annika, if you remember that. And I had to run around London with a really heavy backpack on for about 2 hours, trying to keep up with a relatively much fitter than me cameraman with a very small SDI cable. So yeah, I remember that one very well as well. But yeah, there's been countless ones. I think the elections, I think, are the one that always kind of sticks in the mind. But the coronation is equally, another one. It's relatively groundbreaking to do that private public 5G and that slicing work that we did. And the preparation for all of that and the actual event itself will probably be one of the most memorable ones, I think.
I think it's quite cool to be involved in these things actually behind the scenes.
Yeah, they're historic events, aren't they? They're privileged to be part of it, isn't it?
I think that's always the same. Like there's sort of a certain honour in it, isn't there? Like when you're heading to site and things are getting built out and it's it's coming. It's the same as if like there's a party and you're on your way and there's a little bit of a sort of it's the same thing, isn't it? But you're just you're invited to see something that so many people won't see, or they'll see in a sense of obviously the video footage and things like that, but you can't be as close to some of these people and doing the things, seeing what they're doing. It's just not feasible, is it?
No, and I think in the end, by the very nature, live happens once, and you only get one shot, right, to be able to make it work and be successful. And we're very aware of that. And I think that in the end, that is why people trust us, because we pretty much have a reputation of always delivering, and that's what LRT does. And overall, when you've only got one chance to get it, you have to go with something that you trust, and those relationships are very strong. The products are very strong and well proven. And you're right, and I think there's a lot more of those kind of events, no doubt, on the horizon, right? I mean, we're gearing up now for the Olympics, which is going to be obviously a very big event. We're just kind of working through the Euros. We won't talk about that because I don't want to jinx anything for later tonight. So let's just gloss over that. But the Olympics is obviously a big one we're preparing for at the moment. We've got, a big team of people out of there, lots of units and lots of customers being deployed for that. We're also looking forward to things like the US elections, where we've got a large presence out in the US ready to support all of our customers out there as well. So yeah, you're right. You're kind of in a privileged position of getting to be part of this one-time moment in a point of history. It's genuinely, I can't think of a better word other than it is a privilege to be part of it and to work so closely with our customers.
Awesome. I've got one last question for you then. Just asking what advice you would give to someone that was starting out within, in its broadest sense, the AV industry. So we're including here like all of the different elements that we're talking to, not just from an AV technician perspective, but literally across the whole industry. Like, what's the in? Is it going to uni, getting a degree, or is it knocking on doors? Like, what sort of avenue would you say?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the in for me, I suppose, was having the IT knowledge back in the day. I was fortunate enough to be part of a transition in the broadcast industry when there was a transition from kind of traditional implementations and baseband video and all that sort of stuff migrating to IP. So my IT background helped me a lot in the understanding of that amalgamation between the kind of traditional video AV engineers and the kind of adoption of IP in the industry. So that kind of helped me quite a lot, I think, in the early days. I think being close to your customers and understanding it is important, and I've had the part of being able to do that in a very close way because I've worked with the customers and helped evolve and be part of that. So understanding the end-to-end workflow is critical. And equally, the thing that's changing, and I think that that I guess the younger generation have got on their side, is they probably understand content and the way in which content can be consumed and created probably better than anybody, because they're the demographic that's ultimately consuming it, and I think that they've got that as a benefit overall to them, I think. Other than that, I think I think looking at the educational route for it, I think, is an obvious thing. Going to do a university degree or a college degree centered around broadcast engineering and all of that is obviously going to be beneficial. We equally try and support our educational led customers by providing them with LiveU units for educational kind of projects and stuff. Some universities and colleges and stuff have even purchased units to actually bring them into their syllabus so that they can actually get people, engineers of the future, with that equipment in their hand before they even get into the broadcast industry, where they will then have a good knowledge of it. So yeah, I think that's equally critical. There's a lot of good organizations out there as well for even younger people. The Rise organization's very well publicized, and they do a great job of bringing the awareness of the broadcast industry to the younger generation as well. And they have an important mantra around both equality in the industry as well, which I think is a big thing that needs to be looked at. So yeah, overall I think all of the above, really. Yeah.
I think you could definitely make a presenter.
I don't know about that.
Well, it all seems quite good to me.
I just talk. I guess for me, I've always valued the relationship with people. So I just talk to people like I would expect people to talk to me. And that has always done me well, I suppose. But I mean, I've got some questions for you, if that's okay for you. Obviously, the thing I'm interested in, we gave you an LiVU 800 and a server, and I know that you did some testing at an event in Wales that you plan to do. You had it for about 2, 3 weeks. I know you tested the single camera workflow and the multi-camera workflow, so I'm kind of keen to hear what you thought about the products, how well they
Yeah.
work for you.
Um,
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, it worked, which is fundamentally the point.
That's a good start, yeah.
But this was the thing, right? So there's not loads of nitty gritty around that fact, because I mean, our guys spent a day just making sure that the signals flowed in and out. And actually it worked. It was reliable. On site, we had, I don't even know what the wired connection was. It was terrible. It was like 5 meg up and down or something like that. And that was very iffy. And yet, obviously, all the SIM cards and things were showing, decent signals across them, one way or another. So it did what we wanted it to do. And we would totally use it again for deployment in that scenario when we're going out to field and bringing signals in. The bit that we didn't quite delve into as much as we wanted to was the idea of creating an NDI signal flow from that unit. Because I understand that's possible, isn't it? But we didn't get a chance to really sort of unlock that.
So the NDI signal flow is at the output side, so on the server side. So exactly right. Like the cloud implementation we're seeing, but I can imagine why it would be beneficial to you, because obviously you use vMix. So being able to go from the LiveU server out as NDI is absolutely possible. So you can go out from the servers as SDI, NDI, RTMP, SRT, RTSP, all the other Motown and songs, I'm sure. But yeah, so all you need to do is you need to enable it. Is that there's a license and there's a tick box effectively which turns on NDI from the output of the server, and then NDI will flow from the server side around your network. So not on the unit side today, but on the receiver side, yeah, we absolutely support NDI as a server output.
Well, on that receiver side, we just basically had the SDI output connected and then encoded.
Yeah. So you were doing a double encode at that point, which isn't necessary. You can just hand off native NDI out, so you wouldn't need to do that step long term. So you can probably get some slight improvements in quality, and equally some slight improvements around a reduction in latency, because obviously that secondary encode is going to add a bit of latency, whereas our NDI pass through, it's pretty much instantaneous, really. There's very little latency added when we basically take the LRT stream in, rewrap it as NDI and push it out. Our decoding latency is already very low. So to hand it out as NDI, it's almost similar to SDI really in terms of latency. In the end, you can look at all the sims and you can look at all the graphs and you can look at all of the error correct. You can look at everything. But in the end, the vast majority of camera operators that we work with and field crews, right, they've got enough to do and they don't want all of that complexity. They're being asked to do quite a lot already, whether it be rigging, whether it be setting up the unit or the light or the camera or the audio, there's so many things to do. So that is also why we have these kind of two working methodologies, right, where you can have the unit side, keep it simple, plug in the video inputs, turn it on, 60 seconds later all the sims are connected, set your delay, click play, leave it. The magic, if you like, will be within the algorithm and it'll do itself. But if you want to go into more kind of bespoke workflows, you can say how much data you want to go through this path or prioritize that path, or tell it to use LAN or Wi-Fi more than the sims because you might have a good internet connection that you trust. You can go right down to that granular level locally if you want to, or you can be kind of run free if you like and just hit go. And then on the other side of it, and a lot of people, we don't talk about it a lot because I guess most people just know about it, or we assume they know about it already, but LiveU Central also plays a very integral part to it, because whether the field crew have got all of that knowledge and all of that capability to be able to do those sorts of things or not, it means that with LiveU Central you can log into that management platform and you can do everything you need to do remotely if need be.
Mm-hmm. That's what I found really useful.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you think of Central? Because a lot of people, we don't talk about it enough probably, but it's a key part to what we do.
I think a good couple of days like diving through it, like deep dive, would be good, because I could see there was way more capability than what I was using it for. But personally, for me to be able to just actually get the reassurance that everything was working, everything was routed, and then say to the studio, right, how's it looking? And then knowing that the studio's got the signal, but not just knowing they've got the signal and somehow it's okay, but actually seeing why it's okay, was really good. I'd love to get deeper into the actual cloud processing, like in terms of producing events on it, because there's some events where we use so many pips and so much like outside content and things that actually we've kind of ring fenced that, and we recognize that that is a different entity. But there is this really nice spot where if we've only got, X number of feeds coming in and a graphics feed plus a few lower thirds, that it's perfect. And it'd serve really well for the remote workflow, like we were saying earlier on, with the redundancy in terms of actually people and staffing as well. Because that is really, a big thing. Like if you're on site and you're 2 crew down, again, COVID being quite a good example of this, everyone has to pull together to fill that spot. And you need to make sure that you've got the skill set to do it. Whereas this way round, actually you can have, some backup people that are available that have been trained. If you've got your staff and you've got your lead operators for it, that's great. But you've also then probably got 2 or 3 that are trained, ready to take over if they had to, and probably prove themselves at that point as well, which is kind of like a cool.
Yeah, and like you said, I think the equipment redundancy is a good point, which I didn't mention, and you kindly did. Being able to have equipment that, like, I remember when we first started doing the remote production, kind of Remy style remote production. People wanted to use, say, I don't know, bring content down, maybe use an EVS to edit something, and then push it back up to a broadcast workflow. If that EVS goes down for whatever reason, and I think there was a case where they had an EVS operator that was sick or whatever, so they were able to just go to a different country, spin up a different person in a local production office who had LiveU with an EVS, and they were able to say, look, no worries, we've got somebody else in Australia who can take over. And it was just, bringing everything to IP, well, the internet, I guess, generally has opened up that possibility for everything and everyone. And that doesn't exclude the broadcast industry. It's just that the demands generally are, very, very high in terms of bandwidth and low latency and quality and all of that sort of stuff.
But that
Yeah,
infrastructure
you're
is
right.
gaining all the time anyway, isn't it, as well?
That's it,
Like, as we move forward, like Wi-Fi 7, that's going to be sort of like kicking in. We've got all different things to go with.
Yeah, who knows? I guess 6G's come in at some point. The next iteration of codec as well isn't, I don't know when that will be, but it's probably not that far away. HEVC is the current one, but I think the next one, VVC, will probably be the next one. So you're right. I've been fortunate to be part of that journey, right? Because as I said in the thing, I've seen the products evolve, the connectivity evolve alongside the appetite for consumption. The big point I guess I didn't make on the thing was, a lot of people say to me, yeah, but as connectivity is getting better and better, and they said this in 3G, they said this in 4G, they said this in 5G, they said, well, we don't need bonding. And very quickly people realize, well, actually, yeah, we still do. And the reason is, I think, is because when a new network technology like that comes out, which opens up more bandwidth, it also, people use it. So, when 4G came out, for example, people like Facebook, YouTube, and all the social channels, they released live video services, right? And then all of a sudden, everybody was consuming more capacity on 4G. So, yeah, you did still need bonding. Plus, there are still lots of dynamic components of available connectivity that are around things, whether it's around, it might be the topology of a certain location. You might be on a massive hill or in a valley or something. Connectivity that you get in, say, central London is never going to be transferable to that of the entire, well, planet, or or England, to be less dramatic. And then, alongside the people's appetite to then consume and use that bandwidth, like back in the day, everybody was just consuming download bandwidth, really, because they were watching things and they were just consuming content at scale, which grew alongside that. And then I think what's happened over maybe the last 4 or 5 years or more, people have started uploading real-time video more, they're doing it more and more. So then you start to see things like 5G become more and more saturated as well. And again, 5G, there's lots of things around 5G in terms of frequency and how far the signal can travel, and needing fundamentally more masts to be able to, support that appetite for consistent bandwidth at scale. So yeah, very quickly we realized that on every iteration of network bandwidth and improvements around latency and everything else that go along with that, there is still a very firm place for bonding in terms of people's mindset towards resilience and making sure things go as well as they possibly can.
Our studio is backed up from a point of view of several lines of internet. We've then got sort of power fallovers. Like, we live in a world where, like, we're not overthinkers, but we just want to be safe, and that's the point.
Yeah, like we said before, right? You get one chance to do something live, and whether it's a live event, whether it's anything live, in the end, you get one chance. So you have to approach it with the resiliency as a key point, right? In the end, it's always about three things. It's about quality, latency, and reliability. And luckily, we're all three of those in a nice little box in a backpack. And like I said before, it kind of underpins every layer of what we do. So the field units do that. The production platform, LiveU Studio, that carries through LRT both in and out of it for those reasons. And then the distribution component, we have part of that is built into the LiveU Studio platform where it can output to 30 IP destinations, and of pretty much any IP flavor. And then we've also got LiveU Matrix, which basically enables you to send from your LiveU receiver to other LiveU receivers within our kind of customer base. Basically, anybody who's got a LiveU receiver can potentially receive through LiveU Matrix, our distribution platform. And at every stage of that, LRT underpins everything we do. SRT is great. It has its place. And, really it's designed for fixed connectivity environments where you can trust the bandwidth, right? But it's got an element of error correction and obviously security. But as I understand it today, it doesn't really have the ability to do multi-path network bonding in the traditional sense that we would refer to. And there are implementations that can look at being more network aware and adapting to things, but not in the same way. And I think that's an important point. The fact that we have LRT and it's standardized across all of our products and services, it means that if you deploy a LiveU in the UK or Australia or the moon, not the moon, that's a bad example, but anywhere that you deploy a LiveU unit, you're going to get the same level of consistency in the workflow, and it'll work. And I think there's a big element to that, right? That makes it, makes everybody trust it, understand it, and know what they're dealing with.